Yo, what is up? It is your boys They're back with the finale to What If Deku Was Android 17. I know a lot of you guys actually ended up enjoying this thing a lot, as much as I did, and I know a lot of you guys are going to be a little sad to see it go, but you know, we got to get to other what ifs on the channel that are going to be just as great, if not better. But that being said, let's go ahead and get into this recap and then get started. Okay, boys, so in the last part, we had essentially left off with, Deku had just won the sports festival. And, he had just basically been caught by Todoroki when, some little, little stuff happened. Now, this is when they basically went back to class and Deku chose his name of Android 17. We also went over the Stain arc and, that Deku and Bakugo had to, get a little bit of start working together and gained a little bit of mutual respect, if you guys can remember that. We also basically went over the race that they had when they went back and the finals. Oh, and also Nejire also ended up meeting Deku's parents, and we had basically left off with the forest training arc. I'm just gonna go ahead and get started when they're on their way. So Deku would basically be on the bus with the rest of the class, just playing a couple of games just to pass the time. Suyu would actually say that they should actually end up playing Truth or Dare, as the rest of them would be like, yeah, I'm down. And Deku hearing that would be like, fuck it, what's the worst that could happen? So Deku, Todoroki, the entirety of the class would actually get in on it. Except for Tokiyami, since that guy's a little bit of an emo. And, like all the people who you guys think like would not want to do that at all are the ones who didn't do it. Like just like 3 people just didn't do it. The rest of them were all pretty lit. Now, this is when, dares would start to be normal shit. Like, I dare you to, use your quirk on the bus. Or I dare you to, just do something to this person. I dare you to, text a message at this person doing this. When suddenly out of nowhere, Mina actually looks at Uraraka and then begins to say, hey Uraraka, I dare you to kiss Izuku on the lips. As Uraraka goes bright red, and then she says, it's a dare, I have to do it. As Deku's just like, what? I have a girlfriend. And all of them are just like, do it, do it, do it, do it. As Uraraka just jumps on him and pounces. As she's about to go in and kiss Deku, as Aizawa was like, knock it off back there. As Uraraka's like, oh, sorry. As she gets off of Deku, and Deku's like, oh, I'm not playing this game anymore. For the next couple turns, all the girls would get like devil looks as they all say, okay. And some of them say, I dare you all to kiss Deku. As all of the girls in the bus would immediately begin to rush at Deku, all trying to get, a little piece of that. As Aizawa would be like, knock it off or I'll expel all of you. Right before, who should be the lucky one that got to kiss him? Mina actually kissed him on the cheek, but Deku kind of moved his face so she couldn't kiss him on the lips. And Deku was basically like, okay, I just got raped. That's fun. As Deku just, gets to the little pit stop that they had, as Todoroki's just laughing his ass off with Bakugo, just completely dying. His mom was sitting there like, hey guys, that wasn't exactly the best thing to do. Like, you guys do know you basically just raped the kid. As they're like, nah, is it? As Momo's just like, yes it is. You guys pretty much just raped him. As they basically proceed to, arrive. Now, this is when one of the cat heroes, I guess you could say, would proceed to throw them off of the edge, as they're all like, no, get back on the bus! As they all get thrown off the edge. Now, this is when Deku would proceed to just fly it to the ground, as he just lands like a freaking superhero. We all know that landing, that Iron Man landing, he does that. Just, come on now. He gotta be drippy. So, this is when the rest of the class would get up and they'd be like, ow! As they're like, ugh. You couldn't have saved us, Deku. As Deku's like, I had no way to save you guys. As they're like, you're barriers. You could have surrounded us with them and made us land softly. As Deku's like, oh yeah. As he's like, if I could go back in time, I would. And they're like, you can do that? As Deku's like, no, I was just saying. As they're like, oh. Now, this is when all of the girls would get very close to Deku. They're like, hey, Deku, like, where are we? As, some monsters begin to come out. And all of the girls, including the ones who can defend themselves, get up close to Deku. And they're like, protect me, Deku. As Deku just slaps his face. And he's like, oh, my God. As Deku, Todoroki, and Bakugo proceed to blow through every single, little forest beast. As, they arrive back to the camp in about an hour. This is when they would see Mandalay, as well as a little boy. And Deku would walk up to him and say, hey, what's your name? As Koda proceeds to go in and punch Deku in the balls, as he hits him and Koda hurts his hand, as he's like, ow! And Deku's just like, oh, I'm sorry. As Koda's like, you jerk. As Deku's like, what the fuck? Like, you punched me in the balls. Imagine if I didn't have like this amazing, body that I have. And Koda just walks away. He's like, huh, whatever. As he just leaves. This one, Mandalay, who was already there, would basically apologize for what Deku had done, and the rest of the class would proceed to laugh, as they basically all just end up enjoying themselves and having a really nice meal. During this time, all of the girls would have proceeded to become normal and not beasts who just want nothing but cock. Who said that? Couldn't have been me. Anyways, this is when nighttime comes around, and they have the little hot springs that they had in the original canon. This time, however, since Monetta's expelled, Kaminari is the one who actually tries to climb up the roof, saying that these walls are meant to be climbed, as he then, basically proceeds to run up, as Deku's like, oh no you don't, and he's getting ready to shoot a blast at him, as Koda just smacks him at the top of the head and says, you pervert, as he falls, and Deku just lets Kaminari fall. But when Koda's falling, Deku would proceed to go up there and catch him and take him to Mandalay. This is when she would explain why Koda is the way that he is, and Deku would understand. He would understand that Koda, he had it a little bit hard, losing his parents. Deku would think that that Koda's a little soft at the same time, because he had something way worse happen to him, and he's fine now. As he's just like, but I guess he is a little boy. As he basically just proceeds to just play it off. He's like, whatever. Now this is when the next day comes around. When the next day comes around, Class 1B arrives, and Monoma decides to open his big ass mouth, telling Deku that he's weak and that he only won the sports festival by luck, telling them that the sports festival was rigged and that Class 1A sucks, telling them that Deku's the only strong one in the class. And this is when Aizawa would appear and say, oh, you think Deku's weak? And Deku just proceeds to look at them with a smile, or a grin you could say, as Aizawa then says, how about this, Deku versus your entire class? As the pro hero that's in charge of them would say, begin to laugh and say, are you serious, Aizawa? You think this kid could take them all out? As Aizawa just begins to chuckle and say, I'm positive. As he's like, how about this? If we win, your entire class has to leave. As Aizawa says, well, if we win, you guys have to do all of the cooking for the rest of the time that we're here. As he would say, you're on, Aizawa. Now this is when the match would start, and all of the kids at 1A would proceed to rush at Deku, trying to attack him, but the entire time Deku would have just created a barrier around himself and proceeded to fake yawn, and he's like, you guys are boring. As he then proceeds to shoot small ki blasts or emerald shots at all of the entire class, just knocking them all out immediately. In about an instant, Deku would go up to Monoma and punch him straight in the jaw, sending him flying into a tree, as Monoma touches Deku and thinks that he could steal his quirk, but he was so wrong. He would get punched straight into a tree, and Monoma would be out cold for the entirety of the time. Now, this is when they would basically proceed to get healed, and Class 1B would end up having to cook for, Class 1A, the entire thing. So they would get to just enjoy themselves. Now, this is when Deku notices that Kosa went off. He went off by himself, so Deku decides to bring Koda a little bowl of curry as he goes to see where he's at. Now, when he's over there, the same interaction happens with Koda telling him that, it doesn't matter. This time, however, Deku, instead of leaving, would proceed to sit down by Koda, as he then puts his arm around him and says, as Koda's like, get off of me! As Deku just looks at him straight in the eyes, like trying to let him know that he won't do anything bad. As Koda just calms down a little bit, and then Deku looks up at the skies. He then says, when I was your age, something just as bad happened to me. As Koda's like, I don't care what happened. As Deku then proceeds to say, well, when I was your age, I was actually kidnapped by the quirk doctor, who ended up telling me what happened. And he ended up turning me into an android. He experimented on me and ripped me open, cut me open. He would throw me in baths of chemicals, and he would do everything and anything to me, and sometimes I would pass out because of the pain. One day I woke up and the doctor was nowhere to be found, so I ended up leaving. As Koda's listening to this, and he's like, wow, he has it about 100 times worse than I do. As Koda just begins to realize to himself that he's not the only one who's ever faced bad things happen to him. This one, Deku would explain to him that that's the reason that he has powers. It's not a quirk, it's literal powers of an android. As he would tell Koda to keep it a secret, and Koda would nod as he then says, Okay, I will. As this one suddenly Muscular would appear out of nowhere, coming in to say, what do we have here? As he then looks at him, and then as soon as he sees Deku, he proceeds to say, oh, sorry, I was just leaving. As Deku then looks at him and says, no, you weren't. He would then tell Koda to close his eyes, as Koda does, and then he jumps up into the air saying, Solar Flare! As he then uses a Solar Flare attack at Muscular, then running into Muscular and punching him straight into the mountain, breaking a hole straight through 3 mountains, and Muscular would get taken out immediately. This is when Deku would tell Koda that he needs to hop on his back, and Deku's going to take care of him. As Koda hops on Deku's back, this is when they would rush into the forest looking for any other villains, as Deku would arrive to see Tokiyami being overtaken by Dark Shadow. This is when Deku would use one of his energy blasts to basically take out Dark Shadow and make him go back to his normal state. He would then proceed to tell everybody that he feels like there's a certain goal around, as he would basically just run around looking for everybody else. Since Muscular didn't get the chance to tell Deku that he was looking for Bakugo, he wouldn't have actually known. They would find Bakugo and Todoroki would have actually taken out Moonfish along with the help of Bakugo, you know. And this is when they would all run away. This is when the villain, I think his name is Mr. Compress, would arrive and take Tokiyami as well as Bakugo by themselves. This is when they wouldn't notice, and they would proceed to arrive at where Uraraka and Tsuyu were. Deku would proceed to body Toga as he takes her out very swiftly, not letting her or giving her a chance to run away, as Toga gets captured right there and then, as Deku then says, okay. And this is when they begin to run, when Uraraka says that, you know, Bakugo is not there, as Deku's just like, what? As Bakugo, as you can just see Mr. Compress jumping on the trees as he then flashes Bakugo and Tsukiyami. As this happens, Deku decides that he's not playing, and he leaves Koda to Todoroki and Bakugo and tells Todoroki that he has to protect him with his life. As Todoroki agrees, and Deku would proceed to fly off after Mr. Compress. As Mr. Compress gets worried, thinking that he might catch him, he would throw the orbs at Dabi and the rest of the heroes, as Deku proceeds to shoot a giant emerald shot at Mr. Compress, making him fall to the ground, hitting a loud thump as he hits the ground and knocking him out for good. He would proceed to get captured, and this one Deku would fly, using it top speed to barely jump in through the portal. This means that Tokiyami, Bakugo, and Deku would arrive at the villain's base with Shigaraki, Dabi, Twice, and Kurogiri. You know, Magma and Spinner, I believe they also arrived there, unless I'm wrong. Here, let me look it up. I'll be right back. Dang, apparently Spinner and Magma got away. So the only villains that aren't going to be around during this little hideout raid takedown would end up being Toga as well as Mr. Compress, since Deku would actually ended up taking them both down. As soon as Deku would arrive, he would catch all of them off guard as he began to shoot ki blasts at all of the villains, taking them out as swiftly as possible. This is when he rushes at Kurogiri, before then saying, Solar Flash! As he flashes Kurogiri, blinding him. And that gives Bakugo the chance to blast at him as he begins to shoot the little neck piece that he has, blasting him down on the ground. And Tokiyami uses his Dark Shadow to blast it twice as he then begins to take him out too. This is when Deku would rush at Shigaraki as he begins to take him out as swiftly as possible, as all of the villains are blinded, and Deku would proceed to take them out with swift hits, knocking them out immediately. This went out of nowhere. Deku would ask Bakugo and Tokiyami if they're okay, as out of nowhere a black warping gate would appear. And this is when All For One would walk out, as he then says, as he then begins to laugh and say, Izuku Midoriya, was it? I've been looking for you for quite some time. As Deku then looks at him and says, who the hell are you? As he then wraps his hand against Deku's face, and he begins to slam him into the ground. This would actually hurt Deku as he gets hit into the ground, feeling pain for almost the very first time. This is when Deku would actually get worried and his eyes would widen as Bakugo begins to rush it at All For One as he begins to go, Howitzer Impact! As All For One would basically hold his hand out, blasting Bakugo away with a wind burst. As he then looks at Tokiyami and then shoots a fire blast at him, knocking him out for good. Or not for good, but for like quite some time. It's going to take quite some healing to fix that. Bakugo's out for the count as well as Tokiyami. And this is when All For One would proceed to blast off the roof as he begins to pick Deku up by his throat and say, you took out the doctor that helped me, so I'm going to take you out. As he then as he then punches Deku across 5 buildings, as Deku then flies out and says, "How the hell are you so strong?" As All For One then says, "You took out the only doctor I had, didn't you? So I had to go ahead and find myself another one. It took me about 5 years to find another person or somebody who was willing to have the right amount of tech to help me out," as he would have actually ended up finding a new doctor. This doctor being named Dr. Gero. Yes, I'm putting him into the series because who else could do this? Now, this is when Dr. Gero would appear out of nowhere and Deku would be heavily outmatched. As this is happening, helicopters would show around the city, seeing Deku fighting against All For One, as well as this man with white hair, and he seems to be built very strong. As Deku doesn't know what's going on, but this one out of nowhere, All Might would jump into the scene and say, "I am here, Zuko." As Deku's like, I sure as hell am glad to see you." As a bunch of other heroes would arrive, and Deku would stare down at All For One, as All For One then just begins to laugh and says, as he's not even wearing his head mask that he had in the normal version, he's completely healed. He was turned 25% of an android, and this was more of like a weaker version of what Deku is. This is when Deku would realize that this is going to be the strongest battle he's ever going to have to face. And Dr. Gero was also an android, just a weaker, very weaker version of it. All Might would basically be the one who takes out Dr. Gero in a very heated battle that would end up with All Might losing all of his 1-for-all shards that were left, using the United States Smash to completely obliterate him. And as for All For One, this battle would have massive impact on the surrounding area, as Deku and All For One would begin to rush and hit each other with combos of attacks that they dodge, and sometimes Deku would land hits on All For One, as All For One would kick Deku in the gut, sending him flying into the air as he flies up there and shoots ki blasts at him. This is when Deku would knock those away, and he would begin to say, "Heavenly Cannon!" as he shoots it right at All For One, and All For One gets sent flying, as All For One gets sent flying back, as Deku begins to rush at him and surrounds himself with a barrier, the barrier that only he has. As All For One and Deku get into a very heated battle, this battle ends up shaking the world as we know it, as Deku and All For One would begin to shake the entire world itself as they begin to get into a very long-lasting battle. This battle would begin to last about an hour until All For One begins to get tired. This is when Deku would notice that All For One's getting tired and think that he might not have limitless energy, as he then says, "Emerald Slasher!" and cuts off one of All For One's arms. His arm would be completely torn off as he can't heal it anymore. His energy supply would have actually ran out at this time, as Deku then smiles and says, "Solar Flare!" He would shoot a solar flare at All For One, as All For One gets blinded by it and doesn't know what's going on, as Deku would proceed to look at him and say, "Heavenly," and he would proceed to have almost a fuck ton of giant amount of energy as he shoots it at the sky and says, "Cannon!" as he shoots it right up at All For One, obliterating every single cell of his being, taking him out and killing him instantly. This means that Shigaraki, as well as all of the League of Villains, the main people, would have actually been captured, and that would have taken out the threat of All For One. All Might would basically get up after seeing what had happened, and All Might's little thing would have happened. This is when Deku would fall to one knee, as he then says, "Ah, that was a hard battle." As Deku then wipes his face, taking out off any of the damage or dust that he would have gotten on himself. As Deku's not exactly tired, but that battle would have been the first time that he was actually pushed to his limits. Deku would have actually had to have gone all out in that battle, and that battle would have definitely taken a little bit of a toll on Deku. He didn't know if he was going to be able to take him out, because this was the first time he had ever fought against somebody just like him. Of course, All For One wasn't exactly the same model, and also didn't have the infinite supply of energy that Deku has, so it made it way easier for Deku to take him out. And that would essentially mark the ending of the Hideout Raid arc. Next, we got the cleanup, with this incident being reported on the news and Deku being regarded as the strongest hero in all of history, having taken out an opponent who was strong enough to shake the very core of the earth, as everybody just shouts Zuko's name, and all of the girls are just like, "Izuku!" as Deku's just standing victorious, as he had just taken out one of the greatest threats the world has ever known. This one, Nejire would go to Deku's house, as he then stands tall, and she would say, "Deku, I was so worried for you," as Deku was just sitting there, just laying down like normal, and she's like, And Deku's like, oh, I'm fine, like, don't worry about me, as he and Deku begin to talk. This is when Nejire would proceed to say, so I heard that some girls were doing some stuff to you while you were out in your forced training camp. And Deku would be like, oh yeah, as she would say, I'm gonna kill them. As Deku would be like, oh, no, don't kill them. It's please, like, please don't harm them. I understand, like, how you feel, but please don't kill them. She would get angry and she'd be like, what do you mean? Are you trying to defend them? As Deku would say, no, it's not like that. It's just that I wouldn't want you to get your name dirty. As she would be like, she'd say, well, I'm gonna definitely need to have a talk with these girls if they ever try to do that again. And I promise they're gonna be 6 feet under the next time they do that. As Deku's like, yeah. As Nejire just like pouty, as Deku basically makes it up to her by hitting her with the and really getting in there. You get what I'm saying? He really got in that bitch. You know what I'm saying? He really hit the you know what I'm saying? He really hit them cheeks. Anyways, this is when Deku would proceed to, you know, just go back to class the very next week, as they had actually closed UA for what had actually ended up happening. Now, the news report would have gone very smoothly, and in terms of the little dorms, that would be set up with Deku just basically being like, yeah, it's fine. Now, everybody would move to the dorms, and they would have their little, you know, their little thing on who has the best dorms, you know? And this is when they would all basically report back to class, as the big three would walk in there, and Nejire would basically be like, listen up! As Deku would be like, okay, this is bad. As she would say, if any of you guys try to touch my boyfriend again, I'm gonna put you 6 feet under. As I would be like, oh crap, that's not good. As he'd be like, calm down. As she would say, no, they tried to kiss him. As Deku would basically be like, as the girls would get scared, and Nejire and Mirio would say, well, we're gonna go ahead and have a battle. As Nejire would say, you know what, how about I join you in it? As Nejire would proceed to beat the shit out of every single girl in Class 1A, with the exception of Momo, of course. And she, you know, Todoroki told her that Momo didn't do anything, so she would have, you know, taken it easy on her and taken her out lightly. As she would have beat the shit out of all of the girls, hitting them in square in the jaw and punching them right in the gut, knocking them out, sending them flying. As Mirio's like, take it easy. As she's like, no. As she basically went off on them, you know, like she really clapped their cheeks literally. And Mirio would have taken everybody out with the exception of Todoroki and Bakugo, since both of them were very skilled fighters. In terms of Bakugo, Mirio would have caught him off guard using his little finger poking attack, where he aims for the eyes and then hits him with a very strong punch. And with Todoroki, Mirio would have almost been taken down by Todoroki's ice cold 0-degree ice and his black flames that Mirio was way too caught off guard by. Mirio could have died if Todoroki wanted to, but Todoroki decided not to up the flames that much, and Mirio would have been on the ground terrified of Todoroki, as Todoroki's like, sorry about that. This is when he would say that everybody here needs experience, with the exception of Deku, Todoroki, and Bakugo. And this is when Mirio would proceed to go up to Deku, as he then says, hey Deku, how about you come internship with my sensei, I guess you could say. As Deku's just like, oh, that'd be perfect. As you know, he ends up going to internship with her, as Nejire is just like, oh, but I thought, as Deku's like, I know, but you know, I want to meet this guy, Sir Night-Eye. I've actually been a pretty big fan. As Nejire is just like, well, I get it. As you know, Uraraka and them wouldn't actually end up going there because they're scared of her, and that's not happening. Now, this is when Deku would proceed to go there, and he would meet Sir Night-Eye. Sir Night-Eye would actually have a very, very keen liking to Deku. I mean, he took out All For One, the guy who made All Might terrified, and he was able to, you know, do it by himself, an even stronger version as that. And he tells Deku that he's a very powerful guy, as Deku just kind of like, he's like, thank you. Now, this one, Tsunade and Mirio would basically proceed to tell Mirio that he's gonna take him out for a little bit of just like a pro hero, just walk around. As Deku's like, oh, all right, that works perfectly. As Deku and Mirio would wander the streets, when out of nowhere, a young girl would come in jumping out of nowhere, and Deku would be like, hey, she would be trembling. Deku would notice this, and as soon as Shisaki walks out, he would see Deku and instantly get terrified. Everybody knows of One For All, and they could see how strong this kid was on the news, as Shisaki would be instantly terrified of seeing Deku there, and he would be like, oh, hey, Eri, come back, as he'd clearly have his voice shaking, as Deku's like, what's going on here? As Shisaki would proceed to be like, I guess I can't help it. As he would then use Overhaul to try to send spikes at Deku to catch him off guard. And as soon as the spikes hit Deku, they would ricochet right off and break, as Deku's like, Mirio, take her away, as he would say, I'll handle him. This is when Deku would rush at Shisaki, as he would try to touch Deku, but Deku would blitz behind him and then say Emerald Slash, as he slashes Shisaki's hand off, making one of Shisaki's arms basically useless. As Deku would proceed to look at Shisaki and say, you better get that treated soon or you're gonna die of blood loss. As Shisaki's like, how dare? As Deku then says, Solar Flash! As he then knocks out Shisaki and basically shoots his energy blast at Shisaki to basically, He would essentially shoot the blast to basically seal up the arm, and it would leave Shisaki with nothing but a nub. This is when Deku and Mirio would basically go to find out what Eri went through. And when Eri tells Deku what he had to put her through, Deku would be enraged, thinking that he should have just killed that bastard here and there. As Deku looks at Overhaul, as he then gives him a death stare and says, you're lucky I didn't know about this, or else you would be dead now. As Shisaki's just terrified of him, and he's like, I understand. As he gets taken by the authorities, and Deku's just basically trying to make Eri feel better. As he begins to tell her that he went through something like that when he was her age, and Eri would basically have a little bit of understanding with Deku, since Deku knows what it's like to have that happening. Deku would tell Eri that everything's gonna be all right, and that he's gonna help her feel like a normal girl. As they would have the little UA's festival, with Class 1B doing their play and 1A doing the little concert. In terms of Deku missing the materials, he would end up running out to go to a store very nearby, as he would see that there's a strange guy that he's actually seen on the internet. Gentle Criminal with La Brava. And this is when Deku would, as soon as he sees this, he would be like, okay, clearly need to take these guys out. As Deku would use barriers before they even knew what hit them and say, you guys are coming with me. As Gentle would say, oh no, we're not. As he would try to break out and turn it into elasticity, but nothing would work. Deku would crush the orbs, not Uraraka, but he would crush Gentle Criminal's orb that he has him in. As Deku then says, you're coming with me, and takes them to the authorities. This one he would proceed to take Gentle there, as he then says, if you are planning to interfere with the UA festival, you better be lucky that you didn't get that far, because if that was the case, you'd be 6 feet under right now. As he's like, okay, I get it. As Deku would proceed to take them to the authorities, and they would actually end up having an amazing time in the festival. That being said, this is going to mark the conclusion of What If Deku Was Android 17. If you enjoyed, make sure to leave a like down below and let me know what your favorite part was. And I'm gonna be going, but that being said, Sether out.